Okay. When linguists study how languages change over time, they are engaged in diachronic analysis, that is, analysis over a period of time. Languages can be studied diachronically or historically in various ways. For example, historic linguists may study changes in a single language, such as changes from Old English to Modern English, or linguists can look at changes that have occurred in related languages, comparative linguistics. Thus, historical linguists are interested in studying both the changes that have occurred in a single language over time and the historical relationship of languages to one another. Changes in the meaning of words reflects changing cultural values. The value placed on being old in the United States, for example, changed dramatically between the 18th and 19th centuries. To illustrate, the English word fogey was a term of respect for a veteran in the 1700s. By the mid-1800s, however, the word took on a derisive meaning, largely because our values and attitudes towards the elderly were changing from deference and respect to contempt and neglect. Later in the century, as we became more of a youth culture, the term fogey was joined with new disparaging terms for the elderly, including codger, coot, fuddy-duddy, and geezer. And the derogatory terms used for the elderly continue into the present with such words as fossil, blue hair, senior, what was senior? Gray Panther, Golden Auger, Cotton Top, and Gary, short for geriatric, or Jerry, I guess Jerry with a G. Just as languages change from internal reasons, they also are changed by external forces or linguistic borrowing. It is generally thought that languages borrow from one another for two primary reasons: need and prestige. When a language community acquires a new cultural item, such as a concept or a material object, it needs a word to describe it. This explains why different cultures have similar words referring to the same items, such as automobiles, computers, and coffee. The other reason that words are borrowed from another language is that they convey prestige to the speakers of the recipient language. To illustrate, the French word cuisine, from kitchen, was adopted into English because French food was considered more prestigious than English food during the period of French dominance, 700 to 950 years ago. Interestingly, the introduction of new words into a language parallels the events that shaped that language community's history. In fact, knowing the history of a group of people, and particularly its relationship with other linguistic groups, is an excellent way to study historical linguistics. Again, we can illustrate the history of changes in the English language by knowing something about early English history. For example, approximately 2,800 years ago, the British Isles were settled by the Celts, and which accounts for the original Celtic language. And initial introduction of Latin words was brought by Roman military forays 2,100 years ago. In the mid-5th century, the German language was introduced when the Germans from mainland Europe defeated the Celts. More Latin words, for example, altar, school, chalice, and relic, were introduced when England converted to Christianity around the 6th century. Scandinavian words such as sky, trust, and skirt came into the English language as a direct result of the Scandinavian invasions between the 9th and 11th centuries. A major period of word borrowing from the French language occurred after the Norman invasion in 1066. More Latin and some Greek words were diffused into English during the times of Shakespeare and the European Renaissance. The era of British imperialism from the 16th to the 19th centuries, when the British acquired spheres of influence outside of Europe, resulted in new words such as safari, Mongol, and pajama, borrowed from Africa, Asia, and India. And the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century and the post-industrial information age of the late 20th century brought a large number of words primarily related to technology into the English language. Only slightly more than 60% of all English words today are derived from Old English. In a survey of widely used English words, 38.3% had their origins in other languages. The French language, by far, has had the greatest lexical influence on English, with more than 30% of all English words derived from French. Approximately 3% of English words came from Latin, 1.7% from Scandinavian languages, and less than 1% from German and Dutch.